it becomes kind of hard to love your job when no one else seems to like you for doing it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was listening to this and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what dentists are feeling. It's hard to love your job when no one is liking you for doing it.
Rob, you're here with Dr. Kyle Stanley. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Kyle. As a dentist, it's got to be one of the most rewarding experiences to give somebody a new smile, right? You fix them up with whether it be veneers or ortho work or all on four or full mouth rehab, and you've now unlocked some critical things in their life, like their self confidence goes up. Maybe it's the ability to get a job, or their speech is improved, or they can finally chew the food they want to chew. I mean, so many very emotional highlights come through dentistry. Just highlight a few of those, and maybe you have some personal experiences of these incredible highs that we get in dentistry and restoring and giving back someone's smile.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about dentistry is that what we do is so unique in the sense of that we do aesthetics, right? We can give people back their confidence. They feel better about what they look, but we also give function and we also give health. And so when you talk about aesthetic, function, and health, you rarely have professions that do that. Like, for example, one of my best friends, Dr. Bentale, is a plastic surgeon. Incredible plastic surgeon. He makes people look better, for sure. Do they function better? Not always. Are they healthier because of it?
Hmm.
Not always, right? Maybe if you're doing a rhinoplasty and you're fixing
Airway.
an airway
Yeah.
of some type, right? But
Yeah.
in general, mostly aesthetics. And then you think of things you know, a foot and ankle surgeon, a knee surgeon, an ortho surgeon, right? They're making people function better.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to look nice, right?
Yeah.
If it
They
looks
just,
nice, that's an
yeah.
extra. But have you ever seen the scars on like a hip surgery? They have like a 9 inch, you know, half an inch thick scar. Their whole thing that they have to do is make it function. And so that
Hmm.
makes it very rewarding what we could do, but it also brings in all the challenges because we're expected to have aesthetics, function, and health.
Hmm. That is actually a really insightful point that you're fixing those three things and you're in charge of making the prosthetic itself, right?
Yeah,
And like
that's
so
right.
like there is this multifaceted discipline and impact on a life. I was on Instagram in bed with my wife and I was looking at this doctor posted a before and after to an all on X, and this guy, he was a good looking guy, but his before, it was, gray lines from PFMs, and like he had a gummy smile, and he got all of that fixed, and his new smile was beautiful. And I was like, babe, look at it. This is the like this guy's life has changed,
Yeah.
right? Like this is the difference between, like, if he's on the dating scene, he just went to like a 9.5
Mhm.
with this smile, and like it's incredible how much we notice someone else's smile, how much
Well, the
we
mouth is the
value
number
someone.
two thing you see on someone's
Hmm.
face. So there's some research behind this is the first thing you look at is someone's eyes, and it's for a few milliseconds. The next thing you look at is the mouth. That's again for a few milliseconds. And then you kind of step back and see the whole gestalt of the face. So we don't really notice this, but when we meet somebody and they've done this with eye tracking, you go eyes, mouth, face, right? So it's incredibly
Wow.
important. When you look at the research on smiling, especially in dating, it's one of the top things that people say is having a good smile.
Hmm. Wow. Eyes, mouth, face, and then there's some other bodily features we'll leave
Yes.
out.
Right.
I love that. So for sure, there's got to be this high for a dentist to have this experience where the patient is like crying profusely and thanking you profusely for this incredible work. But it goes without saying that there's also some low lows, right? If a patient is really disappointed or really upset or really fearful, and that's probably a little bit more what we're going to talk about today. And I looked up on Grok. Tell me if these stats are accurate, because the caveat here, there was not deep research. AI did it for me, but Grok estimated that about 20 to 40% of patients tell their dentist, I don't like coming to the dentist or something in that realm. Or another way of putting it is on average, if I'm a dentist with 15 patients a day, 2 to 4 patients are going to tell me every day, I don't want to be here or I don't like the dentist. Are those stats in the realm of like reality
Yeah, the
from what
stats
you
are
know?
accurate. I'm looking over here because I'm bringing up a quote that I saw. My son was watching the show Wreck-It Ralph. Have you heard of that
Mm.
that
Yeah.
cartoon? And Wreck-It Ralph is like this bad guy, okay? And he kind of goes through this journey of it's hard to be a bad guy because nobody likes you, right? I mean,
Mm.
but I'm just a nice guy. I'm just the guy that smashes the building, and so people don't like me. And there was this quote, and he says, "I just got to say, it becomes kind of hard to love your job when no one else seems to like you for doing it."
Oh,
And
wow.
I was listening to this, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly what dentists are feeling. It's hard to love your job when no one is liking you for doing it."
Mm.
And what you said is correct in that you do get patients that say, "Wow, thank you. You're such a gentle touch. I didn't even feel that injection. You changed my life. I started dating again. I got remarried. I'm so confident in my work when I give presentations now. I can speak, I can eat." But that's like one patient compared to the other 100 problems.
Mm.
Dentists, like other jobs, deal with problems more than they deal with celebrations. And one of the things that's so challenging about dentistry is you don't really have time to celebrate your wins. So, for example, let's say I finish a beautiful, just like single crown, beautiful margins. It's milled right. There's nice stain on it. The occlusion was absolutely perfect. I didn't have to adjust it. The patient feels great. And I can look at it and go, wow, like I really did a good job. I can be proud of myself.
Hmm.
I probably have less than 3 minutes before I walk into the hallway, and my assistant is telling me, "Oh, the next patient's here, and she's pissed off because this happened, and she's in pain, and she said your exam is too expensive, and blah 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 blah." So it's like we have so many problems that we never get to enjoy these wins. And I don't think this is unique to dentistry, but it's just a nuance of dentistry because even being a CEO of a business, most CEOs aren't dealing with wins, they're dealing with challenges,
Fires.
problems every
Yeah.
single day. But I think there's something different when it's connected to somebody's body and it's
Hmm.
connected to their self-image. I think that's what makes it unique.
It's tying back into those three things you made at the beginning, right? It's there's an aesthetic issue, a functional issue, a self-image issue, and those issues are stress on the patient that they're wanting you to fix, and there's a cost and there's a time and there's pain involved, like physical pain
Yes.
for the procedure. And yeah, celebrating wins. If there's anything I learned from my dad as an entrepreneur is stop and smell those roses.
Yeah.
Even, get your staff together, celebrate Mary Smith's new smile. She hugged you, she cried. I mean, make a deal of that, like
Yeah.
actually rally the troops and celebrate and have that moment because man, those are the moments we need so that we can walk into the next operatory and
Well, I think it's a human thing. If you think about like, us on the open plains with a tiger or something, we're supposed to focus on the negative because the negative is what keeps us alive.
hmm,
And so
that's a good
even
point.
if you have 8 positives and you have one negative, our brain is naturally going to go to that negative state. So it's really a skill that we have to develop to
Hmm.
have positive psychology. It's a skill just like anything else. And this is something that I've just tried to harp on with the dental community is that we only think that skills are with our hands, but skills can be what's between your ears. Skills can be what comes out of your mouth. I mean, especially like communication. Most dentists are poor communicators, and no blame for us because no one taught us that. Our 4, 8, 12-year studies is just how to make this little thing work out right, how to be better clinically. And, I've helped now getting close to 2,000 dentists.
Wow.
They don't suffer clinically. I mean, rarely do I have a dentist coming to me
Mm,
and be like, I have so much stress because I'm just terrible at doing crowns, or all my implants fail, or whatever. No, because that's what they do all day. That's what they went to school for so long. That's what they spend 100% of their continuing education units on.
mhm,
They come to me saying, I don't have work-life balance. I have a turnover problem with my staff. I don't know how to set boundaries with patients. Patients expect things to last forever. And all
mm.
of those are soft skills that we don't put value on.
You know, I've said this to so many other people, like many highly respected medical professionals, like, heart surgeons and other types of orthopedic surgeons and stuff. They're in a hospital or they're in an organization where they're not responsible for all of the entrepreneurial things, right? The marketing plan to get new patients, the staff management, organizational leadership, and leading other associate dentists, and
Yeah.
running a
Ordering two by
P&L.
twos and sutures and making sure the units work and the chairs
Yeah.
working. Yeah.
I mean, do dental schools give a little bit of rabbit trail question, but do they give much entrepreneurial, like business owner training to get you ready for
We
what it's
had one
actually going to be
class.
like?
We had one class, and I'll tell you when they did it. They did it the last semester of dental school when everybody is frantically running around with their heads cut off trying to graduate on time.
Hmm.
So me and my good friend Matt Caligiuri, I think we're the only people that sat in it every single day. I don't think people saw the value in it, but now that's what people struggle with. They struggle with,
Yeah.
how do I read a P&L? How do I become a better leader? Why is my staff turning over? My front office comes in 15 minutes late every day. How do I talk to him or her and not get them pissed off?
Mm,
Those are all the skills that we need to spend time and money and effort on.
mm,
And that's how we get better. Now, don't get me wrong, you can't be a hack. You have to be a good clinical dentist.
for sure.
But like I said, I've worked with thousands of dentists. I've been to dental offices in Switzerland and Brazil and Australia and Indonesia and Canada, Mexico. Dentists are pretty good clinically.
I would agree with that for the most part. Absolutely, for sure. So, pulling on the thread of some of the mental health struggles, obviously, this is something you've spent a lot of time on and investigating for your own personal benefit. And then now you're serving dentists with this. Actually, my first question: how many dentists have you worked with or consulted with over the past few years in this realm of mental health? I mean, you kind of started pulling on this thread and it opened up a whole new world of need. And
Yes.
so how many dentists have you worked with
Yeah, so I've
on
had
this
about
topic?
1,200 people go through my signature course.
Wow.
We've had about 200 people go through our in-person courses, and then had about another 800 people go through any one of my feeder courses. And so a lot of those have some interaction with me. So I mean, it's
So you've seen a
1,500,
lot.
over maybe close to 2,000. Yeah.
So you're very qualified to answer this question, which I think is a good one to start with. So if I'm a dentist and I come to you saying I'm struggling, my mental health, and it's not a clinical issue, it's like a staff or all the other issues, what are the patterns or the common like root causes that you see? The top 3 to 5 things that they're probably struggling in one of these areas. What are the
Mhm.
most common drivers for mental
First one
health
is the
structures?
mindset. The first one is the mindset, and that is that people think if I'm a good clinical dentist, then that will solve my stress. So they may recognize, gosh, I'm super stressed out. Now, the next thing they do is say, I need to take a better veneers course. I need to take a better smile design course. I need to learn how to do guided surgery. I need to learn how to do 3D printing. I need to bring in chairside milling. I need to understand CBCT better. They just go clinical because that's all we know. And so they just think if I'm better clinically, that's going to solve all my problems. That's probably the biggest one.
Okay.
Okay. Another one is thinking that working harder and longer will solve your problems. Generally, it's about cutting as opposed to doing more things.
Yeah.
We as dentists are hustlers. We hustle in high school to get into college. We hustle in college and take our DAT one or two or three times to get into dental school. Then we hustle in dental school and think when I graduate, gosh, I'm finally going to be able to relax. Then we get out, we have to hustle to get an associateship. And then maybe we find a practice and then we're like, oh shit, now we really have to hustle because now it's all on my back. And then we hustle and hustle and hustle and oh, we hit 1 million. Oh, well, now we got to get to 1.2. Now we got to get to 1.5. And eventually you look back and you've been hustling for 20 years and you wonder why you're burnt out. I
Hmm.
mean, if I got a new car and I kept it in first gear and revved the engine for a year straight, I mean, the engine would blow up. You can't expect something to last that long. So that's probably number two. Number three would be thinking that your physical health has nothing to do with your career.
Hmm.
Dentists love to put themselves last. And it's perceived as being virtuous, right? I'm going to put my patients first. You hear this a lot, like patients first. I'm going to put my team first. I'm going to take care of my team. I'm going to put my family first. All of that sounds really good and nice, but you can't take care of anybody if you haven't taken care of yourself first. I travel a lot. And as you know, when they're doing the safety briefing, they say when the oxygen mask falls, what do they tell you? Put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
think if you're there with your kids, your spouse, we would think like, well, I want to make sure my kids are okay first, before myself. But if you're not in a good state, you can't help them.
Hmm.
That's another thing that people don't realize is your physical health has to be in a good place. So we have to stop scheduling patients on our lunch break. We have to give ourselves time to drink water throughout the day, go to the bathroom. I mean, this
The
sounds
basics.
so crazy, but when I talk about this in my lectures and say how many of you go days without like a full day without having a sip of water throughout the day, 80% of the hands go up. Most of the people say, I don't even go to the bathroom. I don't have time to go to the bathroom, right? And
Wow.
then you think you're going to be able to focus at a super high level. I mean, from the digital world, we measure in microns.
Yes.
Microns. How are you expected to show up and perform at a high level for 8 hours a day and not be in a good physical state? And then the
Hmm.
fourth one that I'll say is connecting your purpose in life with your profession.
Hmm.
That's probably one of the biggest things.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so dentists and other professions do this too, but I think dentists are worse. We think that being the best dentist in the world is what I'm here to do. And that's difficult, especially in a profession where you're bound to have quote unquote failures. So you're bound to have a crown that comes off, an implant that fails, a shade that comes back and doesn't work. A patient's going to be pissed off, right? If you align your whole purpose in life with your clinical work and you're bound to have these failures, it's not like, oh, well, the shade didn't match. It's no, I failed. There's something wrong with me. I'm an idiot.
Hmm.
And so we need to think about our identity kind of how you should think about an investment portfolio.
Hmm.
So let's just say, Rob, you're an investor. In 2005, you've got all these rental properties in Arizona and you are killing it. You're the king of real estate, right?
Hmm.
2008 comes. You have nothing
Bloodbath.
anymore. You're upside down in every property you ever been in. And you're like, oh my God, I really wish that I had diversified my investments because when certain investments go down, other ones go up. So if you were invested in gold or stocks or Bitcoin or whatever, you would have been okay because you were diversified. And that's the same way how we need to think about our identity is we need to think about having a diversified identity strategy. So yes, identity is part of or my dentistry is part of who I am, for sure. It's part of my identity. But also part of my identity is being a father,
Hmm.
being a husband, being a surfer, doing jujitsu, helping children, you know, the helping the earth, right? Loving the beach. And so you can take away something let's say I'm out surfing here and a shark bites off my arm. I probably wouldn't be able to surf. I wouldn't be very good at jujitsu. I probably wouldn't be able to do dentistry, but I could still be an amazing father doing that. I can still help charities. I can still help children. I could still do beach cleanups. This idea of having this diversified identity. And I just spent a lot of time talking, so I'm going to stop.
No, I Dr. Kyle, I've actually never heard anyone talk about a diversified identity, and I'm probably guilty of putting too much identity in my work. I, I'm very passionate about my work. I do find a lot of joy in it. I'm a man of faith, and so I attempt to put as much of my identity in my faith as I can because
Hmm.
that's unshakable.
Yeah.
But I think there are other things. If someone's not a person of faith, like if you're married, what a great investment to have a happy marriage and come
Hmm.
home to a happy partner where they actually want to open up a bottle of wine or watch a show on Netflix with you, and that's really meaningful and that's a
Yeah.
part of your life, right? Or catching that wave or, playing catch with your son. And I think all entrepreneurs are guilty, and dentists are for sure entrepreneurs of sacrificing those other things
Yes.
for the sake of the one that we put on the altar. And if that crumbles, if our identity is in only one thing and that one thing crumbles, I think that's the point you're making, or we have a really bad week or a bad month, it's going to shake us to our core because that's all we have.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you think about people like my friend Martin Mendelson. We do a podcast together called Wellness and Dentistry. Martin is a disabled dentist. So
Mm,
he had his ability to
mm,
work taken away from him.
mm.
I mean, he didn't have a choice. His hand basically stopped working. And think about having, he started in dentistry when he was 16 as
Oh,
an
man.
assistant. So like for decades, dentistry was his whole life. And then to have it ripped away from him, he went through a really hard time because of it.
I bet. I bet. I mean, and there's, a starving need for really good education, especially like digital education. So, any dentists out there that have any sort of disability that prevents them from practicing, I mean, there are a lot of like high value ways to make a contribution in dentistry
Oh yeah.
that is just through your mind and your expertise and
Yeah.
and through those skills that you've learned and trained for.
Yeah, for sure.
So if someone is like, all right, Kyle, I'm the tough guy. I'm just gonna grin and bear it. I don't want to talk to someone about my problems. I'm just gonna like white knuckle this thing. What's a likely outcome that you've seen when someone has a lot of stress in their life and they're just gonna try to plow through it without any help?
I call those coping dentists. There's three different
Okay.
types of dentists that I see. I see the coping dentist. That is them. They say, yeah, I know it's hard, but I'm just going to keep doing the exact same thing that I've always done and hope something changes. They that usually leads to full burnout.
Hmm.
That could lead to suicidal ideation. It could lead to people wanting to quit the profession. Um, and so I wouldn't recommend that. It's just like anything though. Like if we took that dentist and we found something that he or she struggled with clinically, that they had self-awareness of and said, I really need to get better at this, they would take a CE course immediately. I mean, they would
Oh yeah,
spend
all in.
$20,000 on a CE course, take it, fly to Brazil or go to Miami or wherever and take the most amazing CE course. But because it's not clinical, they won't put time, effort, or money into it. And I really wish there was a way for me to catch dentists before they hit burnout,
Hmm.
but I find that that usually isn't the case. And I think that's just a human thing. It's like we don't move unless we have to.
I heard it said that people don't change until they're sick of where they're at. And I think there's some truth to that, right? Where the pain has to get to an intolerable point before we're like, you know what? I'm sick of that. I need to do something else.
Yeah, that's the story of the dog sitting on the nail. I read this last year. I think it's the story. This guy's walking down the street, hears this dog whimper, and he kind of looks around, And there's this dog sitting there next to its owner, and he says, "Hey, what's with your dog?" And he said, "Oh, the dog's sitting on a nail." And he said, "Why doesn't he move?" And he says, "It doesn't hurt enough."
Yep, doesn't
And I
hurt
think that's it.
enough.
It's like we can, like you said, we can endure some pain. But when it gets to the point, like with me, where I came home and told my wife that I was either going to quit dentistry, well, that's really what I told her. I told her I was going to quit. I turned out not to quit. I turned out to go through a journey and understand myself and be able to help others then. But it was basically quit dentistry or get better. Those are my choices.
So it sounds like you hit sort of your own personal rock bottom
I did.
where
Hmm.
you knew that I can't keep doing what I've always been doing. One of my favorite business quotes from Jeff Bezos is whatever got you here isn't going to get you there,
Hmm.
right? And I think that was probably that uh, point of life that you reached, and you're like, something's got to change.
Yes.
So for a doctor that's like, okay, I'm interested, but maybe I'm cautious. Like, so I'm working a lot. I'm working 60 hours, right? And I've got my practice. I've got my revenue. My practice is now depending on my production. So if I take that lunch break or I establish boundaries, my revenue is going to slip. You're going to say, well, it's a worthy investment. Otherwise, the other outcome is you're going to break. So I'm trying to frame up a question here, like what percentage of my time as a dentist should be invested into this category of, taking care of my mental health? Like, what's that going to cost me? Because there is an investment of time
Yeah.
to prioritize this. Like, what is that going to be?
Yeah. So first, I would say the first part of your question or of this example case is this doctor, he or she is doing really well, right? The production is great, but they're like at the limit of what they can do.
Hmm.
How sustainable is that? Because if you're planning on working for 5 years and selling your practice, maybe do that. But if you're planning on being in dentistry for 20, 30, 46 years like my dad did it,
Hmm.
it's
Wow.
not sustainable. And it's that same example that I gave with redlining the car. If you think you're going to redline a car for 25 years, you're kidding yourself, right? So recognizing what is sustainable. A lot of dentists love to have success, but they don't look at sustainable success. They would
Hmm.
rather grow real big and crash than grow slower and finish higher and be able to do it longer. So I also think that a lot of people don't plan enough. And this is another thing that my friend Martin Mendelsohn really taught me about. You know, he worked with hundreds of specialists at Spear Education for about 15 years. Most dentists don't plan their production and they don't know their numbers enough. So, what do I mean by that? You should know what you want to make per year, what your overhead is, what your production goals are per day to hit those. So let's just give random round numbers. Let's say you want to hit $1 million a year. And let's say
Okay.
that means that you have to work, 5 days a week, but, and you have to hit, and again, I don't know if these numbers are working out. You have to do 5K a day in production. And with that, you can take 4 weeks off a year. Then it becomes fairly easy to know how to schedule, how to take time off, and you're not always worried about, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I have to do this.
Hmm.
But the other thing that I would push back on that example is I know many people that made more money working less.
Well, everyone wants that. So what are the what are the tips or the tricks on how to make more money working less?
Well, let's give an example. Let's say I tell you, I need you to do this certain widget, but I need you to do it for 20 hours a day. So you have the ability for 4 hours to sleep, right? How good are you actually going to do it? Probably not as good as if you were sleeping 8 hours
Right.
from a accuracy standpoint, right?
Sure. Yeah, you're going to burn out quickly.
And I think a lot of dentists don't realize that is I know dentists. One of them, oh, well, Narain, that was our
Yeah.
connection actually, and
Yeah.
he knows that I share his story. Is he started out at 5 days a week, and he was really burning out. He ended up,
Hmm.
he was sitting there. His Apple Watch was telling him it, your heart rate is elevated, but it doesn't look like you're exercising. Maybe you should see a doctor. So he
Yeah.
went, saw a doctor. The doctor basically told him, you have anxiety. You need to take time off. And he
Hmm.
said exactly what you said in this example. I don't have time to take time off. I'm booked out. He has a great practice. I'm booked out 6 weeks. I've got a team. I've got this and this. And the doctor kind of said something along the lines of, well, do you have time to be dead? And he's like, no, I don't have time to be dead. I have two little kids. His wife is a pediatric dentist. No, I don't have time to be dead. So he took a day off a week. And
Hmm.
at first, his practice stayed the same. How's that possible? He's doing 20% less dentistry. How could he make the same amount of money? Well, other factors change. Like when you come in and you're rested, relaxed, eating right, you had a great weekend with your kids, with your spouse, your case acceptance will go up because
Your
you look better, you're
confidence.
more relaxed. Your confidence,
Yeah.
your leadership, your team
Yeah.
works harder. They're not as stressed out because for all the dentists listening, if you think your team doesn't know when you're stressed out, oh, they know.
Oh,
You
and
walk
they
in,
feed off of it.
they go, oh
Yeah.
no, Dr. Stanley's in a bad mood, crap, and then they're worried and they're not doing stuff. They're running around with their head cut off. But if you're relaxed, you're confident, your team works better. That means they produce more, they call more people, they get more people in. So there's this weird human, like not talked about interaction that happens. And so Narain was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. I'm making the same amount of money, working 25% less. And then he started dropping some insurance plans. And then he was making more money working less. And he said, wow, this is kind of cool. And then he ended up going down to 3.5 days. So now at 3.5 days, he's making more money than he was at 5 by prioritizing himself.
How long did it take him to get there?
I'm
Is
not
that
sure.
it was
I'm not
there
sure.
a
But,
year or
it doesn't
two?
have to be, I mean, this isn't something you do overnight.
No, but
But I've
there's
heard this
there's
story time and time again, multiple examples.
I mean, that is a cup of cold water to a doctor who's in a desert right now.
Yeah.
This fantasy that I could make the same or maybe even more cutting a day out of my life. The confidence thing, I'm a big believer that, if the dentist is confidence in he has confidence in the price, the time, the treatment, the patient's likelihood of saying yes goes way up.
Mhm.
Right? If the doctor's like, well, I don't know about this, and it could be 2 weeks, could be 6 weeks, or you'll talk to my assistant on price or whatever, case acceptance goes down. But if he's just mentally sharp, on the ball, smiling, happy to be there, I can totally see how case acceptance will go up.
Yeah, and I think you also have to have a with or without you attitude. My dad
Hmm.
always told me you do the best dentistry when you don't need the money. And
Hmm.
it's so true. Yeah, I mean, I can see all the mistakes I made early in my career when I needed the money. I mean, I needed the money. I needed to pay my loans and my rent and my practice rent or my practice bill and all that kind of stuff that I would try to convince people to do dentistry. It wasn't things they didn't need, right? It was things that they need. I wasn't doing it unethically. But I feel like less people said yes than they would like, towards the end of my clinical career where I didn't really need the money. And I'd be like, this is what you need. This is what you have. This is what you need. This is what I think would best suit you. If you'd like to move forward, let me know. Like we have other
Hmm.
patients that'll come in. Like we don't need you. You need me more than I need you. And that with or without you attitude is powerful. But it's hard to fake it.
Hmm.
To truly have that, you have to be in a position to where you really don't need them.
Totally agree that, it's if you're putting the hard press on someone trying to sell them and you're being really aggressive, and if you're like leaning in and raising your voice and being aggressive, human nature is they'll sit back and
Yeah.
be quiet. But if you're just dialoguing with a cadence and presenting confidence and not looking desperate, the patient will lean into you and they'll start asking you questions and they're going to want to get more out of you. And but yeah, I totally agree with that. Not working for my dad had another phrase he always says, son, put the money behind you,
Hmm.
do the right thing, take care of the customer, take care of what's in front of you. Yes, you have to run a responsible business
Yeah.
for sure. But if that's, the second or third priority, and if if I do the right thing and I take care of people and I'm not desperate for this sale, it'll it'll happen in the long run for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So if I know you have courses and there's ways for people to connect with you, but if you were going to give some like DIY advice to someone that's kind of like in desperate need for help, like what are some things, some practical, tangible things that someone could start doing right now, today, this week,
Yeah.
this month, to find some relief if they're really struggling with some mental health issues?
Well, after I give live events like this, I always get a few dentists that come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling, like something's happening." And I usually ask them two questions. How are you sleeping? And do you exercise? And usually the answer is shitty and no. And it's the same idea that like if you think you're going to perform, let's talk about professional athletes, okay?
Mm.
Think of a professional athlete. What do you like any sports?
Soccer.
Soccer.
I love
Okay.
soccer.
Think
Yeah, a
about
lot of running
think about a professional athlete that's a soccer player. They have to perform at an extremely high level
for 90 minutes.
for 90 minutes, right? Maybe
Yes.
including practice, it's 3 hours that day, right?
Yes.
We have to do it for 8 hours. We measure in microns. Now, think about how the soccer players are training physically, their mind, meditation, stretching, eating right, not getting their brain, incorporated with things that are distracting. And we have so many of these dentists that, like, you think you're going to show up to a professional event where you have to measure in microns on 6 hours of shitty sleep,
Mm.
on eating fast food or not eating at all, or drinking a bunch of alcohol or
Mm.
blasting Red Bulls all day. Like, we have to at least give ourselves the best chance of succeeding by showing
Mm.
up in the best way. There's some research to show that 60% of dentists have sleep issues.
Does not surprise me.
And sleep is one of the best medicines in the world. When I was at my lowest point with burnout, I realized I had sleep apnea. I went
Mm.
through this whole process of doing ortho again, doing jaw surgery, doing tongue tie, doing tongue exercises. It completely changed my life. Like,
Wow.
it's one of the best things I've done in my entire life. But I had to have that self-awareness and actually learn from one of my friends, Dr. Victor Kachaturian, who's like this sleep expert that opened my eyes to this. But even just doing that, like let's say you changed nothing else, but now you're exercising, you're eating right, you're sleeping well, you will have a big change.
Mm.
Now, after that, you do need to learn some stuff. Like you need to learn communication styles, you need to learn how to set expectations, you need to learn how to set boundaries. These are probably one of the three biggest things that dentists are lacking.
Mm.
But easy DIY stuff that costs almost nothing is exercise and sleep.
I,
Showing up better to this very challenging job that we have.
I want to echo that. And there's a guy I follow and listen to named Gary Brecka. He's like a natural doctor. No, he's not a doctor. He works with a doctor. He works in a clinic though. But I won't give his whole background and biography. But he's a respected professional when it comes to human um, advancement and just biological health. He was asked, what are the top 3 to 5 things you can do to be healthy? He said, number one, without exception, is sleep.
Hmm.
8 hours of quality sleep. And he
Yes.
started talking about quality sleep. Like if you have a couple drinks right before bed, that actually is going to disrupt your sleep.
Yes.
So do that on the weekend. Have one with your partner, but drinking right before bed on a work night it will disrupt your sleep, and it's going to affect you for sure.
Yeah, the
And
book Matthew Walker did called Why We Sleep completely changed my life.
well, I'm sure all the sleep doctors out there love that little infomercial for sure. All right, so sleep, exercise, probably a little sunlight in there.
Yeah.
So what else could someone work on to chip away and improve some of their own mental health issues?
I think if you can start thinking about your identity as not being completely tied, I mean, there's frameworks and there's exercises to go through this, but even just the self-awareness of people listening to this saying, "Oh, crap. Yeah, I may have tied my entire self-worth to my job." Just
Hmm.
that self-awareness is a big step. But again, when I
Yeah.
boil most of the problems that dentists have in their practice and in their life down to three things, it's expectations, boundaries, and communication.
Expectations, boundaries, communication. So when it comes to communication, that's an important one. This is communication with patients and communication with staff.
This is everything. This is communication with your family, your
Hmm.
neighbors, everything. But yes, a big part is patients and staff. But even like your family, let's give the example of being present where you are. I think dentists have a hard time doing this, and really all humans do. But you have a lot of dentists that when they're in their practice, they are guilty that they feel like they should be at home. And when they're at home, they're guilty that they feel like they should be in their practice.
Hmm.
So we need to set boundaries. Going back to one of my three key things, set boundaries with people. Learn how to communicate that, for example, with your spouse. Hey, honey, when I'm at work, I love you guys. You're so important to me. But when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm getting texts or calls from you about whether we should put Johnny in soccer or whether, our little baby, we should buy this dress for her or not, like that stuff's very important to me, but when I'm not at work. And so unless there's a lot of blood and you're on your way to the to the hospital, I will
Yeah.
call you as soon as I'm in the car when I get home. And then similarly, you have that same conversation with your team. Listen, guys, you guys are so important to me when I'm here, but know that when I am not in the practice, I really like to be present with my family. And
Hmm.
so don't contact me if you're asking if Jennifer should come in at 11 or 11:30 on Tuesday. Tell me that when I'm back on Monday. Ask me that question then. It's much more important then. Now, if there is an emergency, of course, call me. So you see how I'm setting the expectation,
Yeah.
I'm setting the boundary, and I'm communicating the expectation and the boundary.
And then the discipline to be in the moment and
That's
to
right.
commit to where you're at. A wise mentor of mine told me, Rob, he knew I worked all. He's like, even if it's just 15 minutes that you have with your son, make that 15 minutes really count.
Right.
Make a memory, be all in that moment. Put your phone down and just make him the center of your world, because they can tell like a poor
Oh,
quality
yeah.
15 minutes is nothing like dad just focused on them
Yep.
for that amount of time.
Yeah.
And you can make a memory in 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
You can make a
Yeah.
meaningful
I
one.
feel like I just had that this week. My son's starting flag football and we wanted to try out his new cleats. And so we
Mm.
went up to the park we're there for like close to an hour, but it's one of those things where you can't really be on your phone, right? We're running, we're throwing the ball. We ended up finding a soccer ball, so then we kicked the ball a little bit. And we were just both so present on what was
Mm.
happening. And I just saw it in his eyes that he was so appreciative that I had taken the time.
And and what a memory, what a moment, and I believe that does make you a better dentist on Monday morning,
I
for
agree.
sure.
Yeah, because I'm going
For
to
sure.
come back to the practice more relaxed, right? I'm going to feel like, oh gosh, I really should have spent more time with my kids or with my wife this weekend. Blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, I'm prepping a crown or whatever. No, I need to be present where I am.
Yeah, and by spending the time with your son on the weekend, when you then come to practice and you've made that commitment to be present in practice, that feeling of guilt has for sure been mitigated or reduced, knowing that
Right.
like had a great weekend, now it's time to go to work. I think that's really important. I want to transition as we wrap up to digital dentistry.
Yeah,
I believe a passionate believer that digital dentistry provides a path for better dentistry for sure. This is not to say if you're doing analog that you're a bad dentist, but I do believe that digital workflow has proven better accuracy. You talk about managing microns, right? So a really good digital scan of a really good tooth preparation is just going to be awesome. And then you look at, all the other more advanced things you can do with like smile design and mock-ups and implant provisionals and this world of 3D dentistry. But tying it back to mental health, I actually think there's probably a chance for someone to acquire digital equipment and increase their stress levels because they just got
for
in
sure.
over their head.
Yes,
So there is a stepwise approach to digital dentistry. I'd recommend buy a scanner and learn how to scan and send to your lab and just
that's right.
start there and
Mhm.
then kind of take your evolution. But getting well versed in digital dentistry, scanning, maybe a little bit of design, and increasing your confidence in your patient outcomes. Do you see a connection with doctors who are like thriving in this digital world where their stress is reduced and because dentistry has become a little more predictable and a little more consistent for them? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I have a section in my course all about reducing stress through predictable dentistry. I call it
Okay.
predictable dentistry. Predictable dentistry, some of it is analog, some of it is digital. I'm a very big digital, but little things like using a rubber dam, it's not something you could do digitally, right? But
Totally.
that's a way of reducing stress. Now, a lot of what I talk about with predictable dentistry is the digital workflow. It's
Mm.
because things are reproducible. Um, Patients have better experiences with digital dentistry. Just if you talk about the very simple thing of taking a scan, which has become so ubiquitous now, but
Mm.
15 years ago it was pretty darn cool. Patients have a better experience. Now, if patients have a better experience, they're going to have less fear. If they have
Hmm.
less fear, the doctor's going to have a better experience. The doctor's more likely going to come into the practice being happy about it.
Mm.
But I talked about not a lot of dentists have a ton of stress about the clinical part. They do. It's just not the leading one of stress. It's probably the second or third cause of stress is
Okay.
clinical stuff. Um, and a lot of that has to do with doing things unpredictable. Like it's crazy to think of now that we still have dentists that prep teeth, even if they're using the digital workflow, prep teeth, take a scan, send it to the lab, and have no idea what the veneers are going to look like that come back. And then put them in the mouth, whether it's try-in or final restoration,
Yeah.
and say, what do you think? I
Oh,
mean, now with the digital workflow, doing a digital mock-up, doing an analog mock-up from a digital design.
yeah.
And what's funny is when you think about how that reduces stress, it goes back to the three things I was talking about: setting expectations, setting boundaries, and communication with the patient. So let's say
Mm.
we take that scan, we get a digital design, we make we 3D print a mock-up directly, or we 3D print the model, take an analog putty, and then put it in the mouth, and now you can talk to the patient, say, hey, Mrs. Jones, this is what I think would look great on you. Tell me what you think. Or let's try this for 2 weeks and see how your
Yes.
speech is and what your husband thinks and, how you feel like it fits with your mouth, right? And then they can come back and say, I like it or I don't like it or I'd like to change this. That opens the communication. Most of the problems that we have in dentistry really come back to communication. And I haven't talked about this, and I can't remember if I told you this, Rob, but I'm the clinical director of a fairly large lab that
Yeah.
does hundreds of cases a day. I'll tell you, dentists get mad because of communication. I
Yeah.
talk
They just
I talk to dentists
cross.
all the time. They're usually not mad because, oh my gosh, you missed the margin. They're mad because the margin wasn't communicated well, or the lab, in this case, didn't say, hey, we don't really know where the margin is. We're going to guess. Or would you like to take a new scan? Like all of that has to do with communication. And with the digital world, it's so much easier to have this communication. hey, this tiny little part on the mesiolingual of number 30, you see this? We can't, and you could zoom in crazy, right?
Yes.
We don't really know where to mark this. Would you like us to mark it here or here? And you could text it to the doctor, right? And he or
Totally.
she can draw on there, send it back to you. I mean, think of how it's increased our communication. And that all boils down to me to being more predictable, which means less stress for everybody involved.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a great illustration, great point. When you do smile design for patients, it's the aesthetic look, but then it's, lip support and speech and all these things. And wouldn't it be nice to let them have a test drive of their smile so that they fall in love with their temps? Or if they want changes, you're like, no problem. We'll
Yep.
change them in the mouth or we'll do a new mock up.
Yeah.
And then when they're like, I love these, are these my finals? Then you say, no, they're not your finals. Come
Yeah.
back and we'll put the new ones in. And it's just, swapping the new ones in for the old ones. They look better, but it's everything's the same. And, you know, I would say many dentists out there that sort of send the scan to the lab, cross their fingers to see what comes back. It's likely they might be talking some patients into loving their smile.
For sure.
For,
But think about the stress too. Is it
yes.
is it going to be too long? Is it going to, fit with their smile, or is the patient going to like it? Like that is freaking stressful. When you talk about like my partner Matt Najad, when he's doing designs, digital design, prepping through the mock-up so he knows exactly what thickness the veneers are going to be. He's basically designing the thickness based off of the design. When he's putting them in, all the stress that he's putting them in that day is just getting the right um, packing cord and putting the rubber dam on so that we can get the retraction so that we can make the margin nice. That's basically it. It's like make sure the margin is nice and the contacts are good. But you're not worried about is the patient going to like it? Is it going to fit with their face? Because you've already gone through that. And that becomes so easy with the digital workflow.
Yeah, I would absolutely advocate that digital workflow opens the door for increased predictability on so many cases. For sure, doctors need training. And, as we established, they love technical CE. So there's lots of fun digital stuff to
Yeah.
learn. But, getting into digital, I do think opens the door to the potential of, greater predictability in your dentistry. And so I'm a huge advocate for that, which can and will improve your mental health
That's right. I
for sure.
completely agree.
Awesome. So any final thoughts or words as we wrap this up to our
Yeah, I think
audience?
my my big revelation that I had in my career is mastering your mental and relational health is the most effective way to ensure sustainable success in dentistry. A
Hmm.
lot of people think that having success will happen because you're so good clinically, but
Hmm.
you have to have a base level of clinical knowledge. And really,
Yeah.
after that, it's a lot of the soft skills that really gives you sustainable success.
Will you say that first part again? Mastering what?
Mastering your mental and relational health is the most effective way
Hmm.
to ensure sustainable success in dentistry.
I love that your mental and relational health. I was keying in on that, and Warren Buffett was asked, how do you? What's the mark of success? Right? He's got all the money in the world, right? And how would you evaluate success? And his answer was amazing. His answer was the number of people in your life that you want to love you that actually do love you.
Mm,
And I was just blown away because it's true. Like some of us just need a small tribe of like, my wife or husband and a couple of kids and friends, but some of us have a larger network, right? But if there's a number of people that you actually want them to love you, and if they do genuinely love you voluntarily, what an amazing measure of success.
that's right,
And I love that definition. I think that ties into that relational health.
for sure.
Dr. Kyle, thank you so much for the time. I found this discussion really awesome. And for those out there that want to get in touch with you, what's your website that they could reach out to you on?
Yeah, it's just drkylestanley.com or Instagram. It's the same thing at Dr. Kyle Stanley. So it's Dr. Kyle Stanley. That has everything that you'll need from me.
Awesome. We'll drop the URLs in the notes. Dr. Kyle, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for
Look
having
forward
me.
to the next one.
Let's do it.